Hello and welcome back to Just Another Football Podcast. It's nearing the end of the season. I've got Harry with me at the moment, a very disappointed Harry, given the weekend. I suppose let's just get straight in. I'll just give a brief summary. We're going to talk about, obviously, Man City winning the league, Arsenal, and the relegation. Sort of the important points at the end of the season. We're in the business end now, as the cliche goes. And yeah, we'll just start right into it. Arsenal. Harry, you were there, weren't you?
I wasn't actually at this game. No, it was up in Nottingham. I'm glad.
Oh, sorry, it was up in Nottingham. Yeah, that's right.
It was. It looked like a good day out. Nice little Saturday, 5:30. We don't seem to get many of those kickoffs. But no, I wasn't there. Thank God for that. The way it sort of panned out. But obviously, was watching, and yeah, horrendous. Absolutely awful.
In some ways, I was actually happy that, cause I honestly did want Arsenal to win. Although I'm a Chelsea fan, I'm an Irish Chelsea fan, so the London rivalries aren't always or the typical rivalries aren't always like felt over here. It's more like who you surrounded by, and over here we're surrounded by like lots of Arsenal fans, but more importantly, Man United fans and Liverpool fans. And the Arsenal fans I know, my best mate is an Arsenal fan, so I'm always a bit, and he's quite sound about it. So I really don't mind Arsenal, and I think it would have been better for football in general if they had won it. However, I was kind of glad that it was done in this way, that it was your loss that gave Man City the title, because then Man City couldn't win the title against Chelsea.
Against Chelsea.
Which, you know...
On it, though. Lesser of two evils. We had to give Man United a Guard of Honour 10 years ago.
As the Chelsea fans reminded Man City fans, the last time we gave Man City a Guard of Honour was actually when they lost the Champions League final. The players gave them one then off the pitch, in more of a rugby style. I remember doing that whenever I played rugby for a season. With, like, at the end of the game, the winning team always gives the losing team a Guard of Honour, which is I don't know how I felt about it as more of a football fan. I was like, it's like kind of rubbing this in our face, but yeah. But yeah, Arsenal, he's have just fallen off now. The belief wasn't there.
You're skating around the B word, and I'm going to use it, and I've pushed back on it at sort of multiple points. But the last two games, we bottled it. 100%, we've bottled it. Now, there's various different reasons and kind of layers to all of this, and like, I accept it's kind of not just as simple as we were in a good position and then they saw the finish line and couldn't handle it. But there's absolutely no doubt that since the run-in, since the April or March international break, we've not been the same team. And this isn't anything new. There was an iteration of this last season, albeit when we were going for top four rather than obviously going for the league. But since the international break, we've played 9 matches. We've won 2, drawn 3, and lost 3. That's 8 matches. That's not very good maths for me. However, the point remains that it's a really poor return from the available fixtures, in truth. It's not been good enough. I think it's 12 points. I think 3 wins. So either way, it's been a really, really poor run. And it's not just been the games we've lost necessarily, and not just been who we've lost to, but it's kind of been the manner in which we've lost some of these games or drawn some of these games. And Saturday, I actually think if you're looking sort of back a bit further, I think last weekend when Brighton scored the opening goal, that was it. Our season ended at that point. That kind of any hope, even sort of like pretending that there was any sort of hope of getting back into the title race, I think at that point the players quit, and it's not something I'm particularly happy with, because I actually think these things can have kind of a lasting impact, not just on the players themselves, but just in terms of the way you're seen. No one's going to remember how good we were up until April. They're going to remember how the way the season ended and ultimately where we've ended the season, which is well off the pace. I know we'd played more games than Man City, but to have had an 8-point lead going into the last 9 games of the season, we're potentially going to finish up to 10 points behind them. That's too big of a swing at this point in the season, And it's just reflective of, I think, just general shortcomings with the squad, maybe shortcomings with the manager. I think he's done brilliantly this season, but it's a long-standing concern that as soon as he loses a couple of players from his preferred 11, his preferred system, he doesn't seem to have the answers to keep us on the tracks. And as I said, the points we've picked up since the international break would be 13th in the table. If the league had started at that point, we'd be 13th. And it's not like you're talking about 4 or 5 games. It's a quarter of the season. It's 9 matches. And that's too long of a period to have played as poorly as we have in some of those matches. And for me, it's big question marks. I suppose if you're going to find any silver lining to it is if you're going to have a bad stretch of the season, you're going to ultimately fall short of winning the title. If you do it at the end, it's fresh in the memories. There's no excuse now not to go into the summer and address the shortcomings with the squad. Because what I will not accept going into next year with the Champions League, and once you've set the bar, competing for the league, at least being kind of in and around it, people aren't going to accept us then going back to being sort of 4th or 5th next year.
No.
You really have to consolidate kind of being a solid Champions League level team. And it's harder to do that with more games. I mean, you look at it, we've pretty much played only Premier League matches since the middle of March. And I don't know if that's helped us in truth, actually, in terms of the way we've actually handled ourselves in those games, kind of having that big, long build up to them. But there's no excuse physically. You talk about a couple of injuries, but we've had most of the squad available. They should be sort of fighting fit. We've played loads and loads of matches across various competitions. So just really not good enough. And it's, there's, as I said, there's multiple sort of parties to blame here. But ultimately, the way it's ended is really, really disappointing. In what has been a very enjoyable season, kind of for the most part, and we've had some very memorable days, and I've enjoyed large parts of it. But as I say, you can't go on the run we've gone on the end of the season, and call it anything other than a bottle job, because that is what it is, and that is not a word I like, but it just simply is appropriate in this instance.
Yeah. What you're saying is that Arteta's got to go then, is no.
It's like sort of more generally speaking, he
Yeah.
has to be better at finding imperfect solutions. And it was something he did quite well when he first came in. He sort of was quite pragmatic and accepted he didn't have the players he needed, but we just needed to get results in whatever way possible. And we've got a much better team now than we did then. I mean, really, sort of in this run-in, you're only talking about one player, and he's very good, Saliba, but I'm not sure him being missing. Well, I know for a fact him being missing shouldn't turn us then into the 13th best team in the league. It's just not acceptable. So there are sort of multiple facets to this. But what I would say is he is a manager that demands specificity. And you've seen it this season, I think, with the left back role, where he won't use Kieran Tierney at all, which, I'm fine with long term if he wants to replace him, like, not a problem. But once you've kind of got into this imperfect situation where Zinchenko's injured a little bit and he's playing injured, I think he's been injured for parts of the run-in and we've sort of overplayed him, and it's actually cost us in a couple of the matches. Not having him in the team isn't an excuse to then just not be able to build up in any sort of way and essentially not resemble a football team. Sort of this up and under action where, and then he's playing a centre back at left back and a centre midfielder at right back and a right back this season at centre back, and it's just a complete mess, to be honest with you. And he's got to get better at finding solutions to injuries, because that is part and parcel of it. I wouldn't say this season. We've had a few. Jesus obviously missed large parts of the season. The Saliba missing as long as he has done, I think, is quite unlucky. You don't expect someone to miss what will end up probably being about 3 months with a back injury. Yeah. But at the same time, he's been in the job long enough now, I think, to have the squad and to have learned from sort of previous examples, because as I say, it happened last season as well, where we lost Partey, we lost Tierney, and the whole season fell apart in the last 9 games of the season. He's got to get better at finding ways to get results when he doesn't have the exact 11 he wants on paper. And it's only going to get harder next year because we're going to have more games, potentially be in pot 3 of the Champions League, which, I mean, we'll come to in a bit, but that would make it more difficult for us because we're likely then to get a harder draw. So I think generally, like, the way I look at it is, if he's not happy with the squad he's got, it has to be addressed in the summer. You know, you look at some of those bench players, and I think some of them will attract offers. Tierney, I mentioned, I think is one of them. I think Newcastle sort of is the move that's been muted. Got to take it. You know, I think he's a decent enough player, but the fact of the matter is the manager doesn't trust him and doesn't want to use him. And I think we'll get a fairly decent offer from them. He's an example of one you've got to sell. And there's other players. He doesn't fancy Smith Rowe anymore. Sell him. You know, the time comes for these players, and they're players I've liked at various points. But the simple sort of explanation for it all is, if he doesn't think they're good enough to play in this team, in this system, that ultimately is what he thinks gives us the best chance to compete at the top level, he has to get rid of them, and he has to replace them with players he thinks are good enough to do that.
That's what I was going to say. It's all well and good saying get rid of them when you've got more games coming up next season, but then you have to replace them. Someone like Smith Rowe, I feel like there's a place for him in a squad that's playing Champions League and Premier League. You know, I'm trying, like, if you think the team that he would move to, it's probably like an Aston Villa, maybe even a Brighton. You know, like, I don't think he's gonna fall down too far from the top if he was to get a move. So it's like, surely he's good enough for a squad player to play the bottom half teams.
He scored 10 Premier League goals last year, 10 or 11 Premier League goals, which you can't be a bad player and do that. So yes, I think there's certain aspects to it, like maybe he's not. He strikes me as someone that he's had various different injuries. Is he someone that's doing absolutely everything to be back, you know, ahead of schedule, fully fit? 'Cause he's someone that picks up recurring injuries, and it's sort of, I get those things can grate on a manager, but I think with Arteta, there's a few examples of him being a little bit too quick to go, right, well, I'm not working with them. And being honest, at a club like Arsenal, this isn't Man City where you can sort of, you know, Man City can get rid of Cancelo in the middle of the season and go, yep, it's fine. We've got the squad to ultimately replace his absence. At Arsenal, you know, you're looking at probably at least waiting another transfer window to then address something like that. And as you say, you've got to get the right players in. We need more players than we probably should be selling. You know, you're talking about we need to sell some of the squad players to bring, obviously, money in to then sign other players. But the squad is short anyway. I think there's only kind of, you know, at most 13,
that's what I mean. You're already going to have to invest in players. So, like,
Xhaka's going as well. He's been a starting player. It's
like, there's 3 players: there's Xhaka, Smith Rowe, and Tierney. And you look at them, you go, you know, they're squad players, but they're not like you never want to see them play again for Arsenal. They're like they're very useful players. So and the likelihood is that you'd be doing well to sell those players and then not spend more than what they're being sold for to replace them.
We will have to, because we already need more players. That's what I mean. We're already short. And I actually think, just sort of more generally speaking, I'm not saying it's easy to go from 8th to 5th and then 5th to 2nd, but I think that the sort of talent pool you're looking within to sign players that are good enough to do that is obviously bigger. Where it becomes smaller is obviously trying to compete for league titles, trying to compete for Champions Leagues. The actual available players that are then good enough to take you to that level, you're obviously looking at a smaller group. So it's all good saying we need to sign 5 or 6 players, which we absolutely do. Like, I'm the first to say that, but you have to get it right, and it becomes more difficult when you're talking about at the elite level to challenge the elite clubs like your Manchester Cities, and you know, maybe if Liverpool come back next year, like, I think other clubs are going to look to improve. If you want to sustain at that level, you have to get the right players. I don't think we're in a situation where we can take a punt on 2 or 3. Like, they have to be guys that are ready to come in and improve the team right now. And I think the sort of marginal gains you're talking about, it becomes at this point very difficult. It's the most difficult window, I think, because they've set the bar as high as they probably can do without winning a league title, which is we're going to compete for one, take it deep into the season. Like we expect to then be back there because we've shown we can do it with a smaller squad. But to actually get the players that kind of maintain that level across multiple competitions, I'm not saying it's an easy job, but what I am saying is if you make this kind of bed for yourself where he doesn't want to work with players that don't quite do the exact things he wants on a football pitch, then unfortunately you have to then get it right in the window when you're talking about replacing them and getting players that do offer that specificity that he always talks about. And he shows it with his team selections. So
Yeah.
big window upcoming.
I always feel sorry for Tierney just talking about him. I think he reminds me of like Pulisic. It's like a great player whenever they've got like a run of form, but the injuries just don't stop. And like
Which is why
and
we
it's
signed left back in the
the,
summer because
yeah.
he couldn't be relied on to stay fit. We took a punt on a left back last season. It didn't work out in terms of bringing Tavares in. He obviously wasn't at the level Arteta wanted. He's gone out on loan, and it then became a decision about, okay, we've got this left back who's good when he plays, but he's only fit for maybe 50-60% of the season. And I think Zinchenko coming in, I don't know if Arteta thought he would then make the impact he has, but it's kind of like most of the time he plays, he's very good. It's hard to take out the team. So maybe it's a little bit unlucky, but what I would say is I think his use of Tierney is it's the best example I can give in terms of him not quite being able to work with players that he doesn't quite love their skill set. Because Tierney's a good player, but he just doesn't offer the same things
He can't step in the midfield
He's going to
as well.
He's going to stand on the touchline and run up and down, and he's he's a decent 1v1 defender. I still think you can use a player like that. Like I feel like if he goes to Newcastle, he'll be a good player. You can imagine him being a good player for them. And
the only question mark about Tierney for me is keeping fit. I've always thought he's a great player.
He's not played a lot, so I like. Look, I'm not saying he's the best player in the world. I'm not saying he's as good as Zinchenko, but it's just a sort of small, like it's an example. It's an anecdote of what he struggles to work with players where he's looking at them and thinking, I'm not quite sure that you offer the exact abilities in a player that I want. And I think that is what's going to be difficult for him. And it doesn't excuse going on the run of form that we have and dropping the points we have in the positions we've been in. Not having Zinchenko against West Ham, or not having him in the last couple of games, or Saliba not being there. Like they're obviously very good players for us, but I've kind of had it with this, and part of it is as well. And I've rambled on about this, and we will move on. But when you're in the Europa League for so long, I think you get into this kind of unhealthy cycle of, right, well, what we do, we have an 11, and then you just have a load of squad players that you chuck in for the Europa League games. And I think what it just creates is this kind of first 11, second 11 thing. Whereas you look at the elite teams like your Man Cities, probably your Real Madrids, and some of the other teams on the continent, it's kind of a core group of 15, 16, 17 players where they're swapping them in and out for Champions League games and league games on the Saturday and a Champions League game on the Tuesday. And it's sort of a change here, a change there, and you're not making the team noticeably worse. Whereas you look at us this year,
it's a real competition for places. It's not like a defined. You are in the first team, then you are a squad player.
There's your De Bruyne's, your Haaland's, your Benzema's, your Vinicius. I get it. There's a couple of players that always are going to play.
But even an example of De Bruyne, like there was times where he wasn't doing it, and he was dropped from the team.
Whereas Arsenal, like, can you imagine if and Saka probably needs a rest the way he's played in the last 10 games, but can you imagine he was playing well and Arteta took him out of the team? Arsenal fans would be up in arms about it, and it's that sort of thing where we need to get comfortable with the idea of rotation and having a squad. I think people are just from being in the Europa League for too long, you get conditioned to sort of you fear competition for places, and I don't think that's a healthy mindset to have. I think you actually need a squad where people are chomping at the bit to get a game and ultimately motivating one another. I think healthy competition is the way we need to be looking.
And one way that Arsenal have decided to try and motivate the team is by bringing in Win. It was the only win they could buy.
Yeah, it's the only one we're allowed to buy. It's Yeah, I mean, good start. Seriously, I'm
I
not.
actually think that there isn't it's a great idea. Because you can see him just like running around the training ground. That would just bring us lift
He's
up
got that
everybody,
side
wouldn't
to
it?
him, Arteta, hasn't he? Like you saw it in the Amazon documentary. Like he has these kind of weird and quirky ideas where I just can't imagine Guardiola doing that. He sort of seems a lot more kind of like strict and set in his ways about certain things.
Me, me and my mate that I was saying is an Arsenal fan. We kind of have this sort of harsh running joke that Smith Rowe isn't the brightest, and
No, well,
I like to think that every like ridiculous concept that Arteta's come up with for a team talk or whatever is specifically tailored to try and make Smith Rowe understand something. And I
not
just like to
working.
think that
Can't get a
he's
game.
I like to think that he's trying to motivate Smith Rowe, and he's just at the very end he's just gone. Would you like a dog? Do you want a dog? Smith Rowe's even got to name him and everything. That's
And he
the
still can't get off the bench against Nottingham Forest when we're going, we're 1-0
yeah
down and got some injuries. Yeah, I know. It's looking a bit bleak for him if your sort of hypothetical situation bears any truth to it.
yeah no. It's a funny narrative. I like to imagine it in my head. It makes me chuckle. Anyways, the other side of it then was that you lost, meaning it was mathematically impossible to overtake Man City. There go
Yeah.
Man City are champions, the three-peat.
Mm.
Um, it was it's just amazing how it's come around. Like I was totally thought that Arsenal would go on and win it. Look so
At
good.
least take it like to the last week of the
Yeah,
season. I
yeah.
think
It is disappointing that
that's
there's no risk
they
going into
haven't kicked a
last.
ball. So they had a good win at Everton, and they've not kicked a ball. Or they hadn't kicked a ball since, and then they're champions because we've lost 2 games. It's sort of
This has
like
happened. I feel like this has happened more and more that like that the team that won the Premier League didn't. It wasn't their game that decided it.
mm.
I feel like it's maybe it
Remember
feels
that the Liverpool season, it was Chelsea, wasn't it? Chelsea beat Man
yeah.
City in that lockdown game. I remember. Obviously
And
last
then
year City
the
won it on the
Leicester
last day.
season, it was Chelsea as well. We have a habit of doing it. And yeah. Anyway, but yeah, Man City, like what a team. Like they are just so good. The game against Chelsea was just it was desperate to watch. Chelsea actually made a couple of chances, maybe could have actually won the game, with the
Yeah.
chances that were made. But Man City, it was just so easy going for them. Just foot off the gas, um, and yeah, they ended up um they ended up just cruising to a win. I think I don't think I watched the last 10 minutes of it. I was like, what was the point in this? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, well, what do you think? What do you think of Man City? If you're sort of to try and
I
take your
yeah.
Arsenal
Yeah,
bias away.
there's sort of like yeah. I mean, as a team, and I think you've got to kind of break this down specifically. I think post the actual charges that were brought against them. I'm not saying this is because of it, but it's literally since then. I think they've won all but one game in the league. I think they drew
Yeah.
to Nottingham Forest 1-0, and they should have beat them like 10-0. Since then, now I'm not saying that's the fire that kind of they needed to get them going. I actually think it's more sort of they've obviously gone back to basics. I think you look at their defensive record in this run, they've stopped conceding goals, and that is the sort of when you look at us, sort of if you're contrasting it, too many goals conceded, going behind in matches too many times.
Hmm.
They've not been behind, I think, for more than 10 minutes at all in the last
Hmm.
3 months, which is just
Hmm.
crazy when you think about it. Not dropped a single point from winning positions. It's just, and I think like if you look at the team they've built, it's probably their most kind of you would say solid 1 to 11 when you look at it. Because
Yeah.
I think even as great as a couple of those teams where they got 99 points and got 100 points, 98 points, like you always felt like you could get at them. Like you looked at
Hmm.
it, I think Otamendi would be playing for them. Like I never
Yeah.
really rated their fullbacks at the time. Like it was all a bit. It was
Hmm.
very kind of attack, but like they had a very good attack, and Fernandinho did a phenomenal job as a midfielder. And you know, they were so good to watch sort of with their attacking play, but you felt like you could get at them defensively. I think the bit that's impressed me most about their team, sort of in this run, is you look at it and it is practically it's four centre backs really when you look at it. I know Walker sort of plays, you know, occasionally sort of he rotates a little bit,
Even
but he plays as a sweeper,
if
right?
you
He
even look at
stands
it
there.
like in terms of like physical attributes, it's
It's
like
big. It's a
five
big back
centre
four.
backs because
It's Rodri as well. He's huge.
Rodri's
Yeah,
just like, you know, he's a defensive midfielder, obviously, but like he's got all the
physique of a
attributes to
centre
do a
back.
centre back.
Yeah. He's
Um,
played there for Spain. So you
yeah,
sort of look at it and you think this is a and you got Haaland up front, like they are a physically imposing team to play against. And then they're technically just obviously off the scales
mhm,
good. And they've got a guy that's, you know, tracking 60 goals for the season. Like I'm very harsh in our part of it. The one bit I wasn't particularly harsh on was actually losing to them because
yeah,
I look at it if they're on their game, I don't know how you beat them. I think you
no,
need an extraordinary amount of luck and things to go your way on the day to give them a game. And you look at them. I mean, what they did to Real Madrid, which that's Real Madrid's competition, and I don't think Real Madrid have lost Champions League games. I've never seen anyone hammer them the way they did in that second leg of that tie. I
maybe
mean,
did
it was
Dortmund do it? Was that maybe the one you could compare it to?
they did in the first leg. I feel like it ended up quite close at the end of the second
Mm,
game. But the first leg, I think they beat them 4-1, didn't they? And I think that's the
yeah.
sort of last time you probably could look at it and think they've taken a draw. I mean, I think Ajax had a 3-0 win against them
Oh yeah.
a few years ago. But again, sort of slightly different circumstances. This was just an absolute. I mean, they
They
could
didn't
have been
let them out,
4-0
did they?
up before they scored, to be
Yeah.
honest. And then they go in 2-0 up. And you know, there's a bit of pragmatism that sets in, and they put the gloss on it. They probably get the 4-0 they should have got from earlier in the game, kind of,
Mhm.
and a couple of goals later on. Just phenomenal. And I think it is hard to cope, like, sort of when a team puts the kind of the frighteners on you like that, when you are going for
Mhm.
your first league title. Like, I'm not saying it's easy as much as I have been critical, but they are a phenomenal team. I am a little bit conflicted about the whole thing, and like I understand any Man City fans listening, like you're gonna think it's sour grapes. I get it, but the whole idea that they win the league yesterday, and
Mhm.
you've got like the chief of the Premier League, Richard Masters, stood there handing them their Premier League winners medal, like literally at the same time as the Premier League are trying to bring 115 charges of financial misconduct against them as a club.
Mhm.
Like it's a little bit bizarre if I'm being honest, and I'm not saying these things like can be resolved kind of quickly, but it's not a great look. And look, we'll see what happens in terms of the sort of resolution of it, but that's the only thing I would sort of look at and say like it's not a great look for the league. Less Man City, they're not going to care because it's not on
Mm.
those players and this manager necessarily to feel in any way conflicted, and nor should they. And they've been phenomenal since February. It's kind of just sort of a wider point on the state of the game and the Premier League themselves. But yeah, City are phenomenal. I think they're odds on for the treble now. And you know, you look at it in the summer, and it's sort of we've been the closest to them this season, but I don't know how you close that gap if they don't drop a major howler in the summer. And I think the only sort of minor thing is maybe Gundogan leaves, and I like there's rumours we might get him. I'm not sure about that, but if he goes, he's a difficult player to replace.
Mhm.
But they've got so many good players, and it's sort of they lose. They can afford to lose good players and still not drop that much, or certainly not drop kind of back to the level of the sort of chasing pack. So yeah, tough ask, mate.
Yeah, our only hope is that the Premier League throw the book at
Throw them out.
Haaland. Well, there's that, but then also throw the book at Haaland for swearing on live TV. So
Yeah.
there's a campaign on Twitter.
That's got to be at least a 6-month ban. I think.
Yeah,
Shocking financial misconduct.
I think that's
Absolutely
far
terrible.
worse than Ivan Tony's. Um,
It's worse than the
uh,
financial misconduct from them, mate. It's
yeah,
absolutely terrible.
absolutely.
They
Throw
should
the
throw
book
him
at
out
them.
of the league. Absolutely, hundred
Um,
percent.
but interesting what you were saying about just how solid they were. It was a point that Guardiola made on in the
Yeah,
post match. He mentioned about his main sort of priority with the players he was selecting was that they win their duels. That was, I think I got that right with the
Yeah, and
phrase he was
he
saying.
referenced certain like wingers, didn't he? Sort of in terms of trying to stop those
Yeah.
caliber of players where that Man City are all about control, aren't they? It's they have as
Yeah.
much of the ball as they can. They play the game in the areas they want to play it, and they've got such good attackers that if they've got you penned in for that period of time, they will score. And I think what he sort of obviously wants to reduce is when you've got players that can obviously force you to be running back the other way and actually defending transitions and pose you a threat in the other direction, then that's not what he as a coach likes to see. So in terms of he's obviously played with kind of more flair fullbacks, whether it be Cancelo,
Hmm.
whether it be Zinchenko, whether it be Rico Lewis. Like he has preferred that at points, but
Hmm.
this season and even in previous seasons, as we mentioned, they were always susceptible on the counter attack. Whereas you
Hmm.
look at this current iteration and as you said, and as he's referenced, like they're just giving absolutely nothing away in terms of winning their 1v1 battles
Hmm.
and giving teams absolutely no hope in games. They're not even giving teams 10-minute spells where they sort of are on the
No.
ropes a little bit and have to kind of ride it out. They're just smothering teams, absolutely giving them nothing. I mean, that's the thing. You probably sort of feel it yesterday when you watch them. Like it's only 1-0, but it feels like it's worse than 1-0 because you're just like, how the
Hmm.
hell are we going to get back in? Yeah, you're almost thinking they need to make a mistake or
Hmm.
do something wrong for us to actually like get a chance here because they keep the ball so well. They're defending really well at the moment, so it's a bloody tough ask to think. Well, God, how are we going to beat this team? Really tricky, really tricky.
Yeah. Congratulations, Man City. I feel like whenever I'm saying it, I'm like that guy from "Come Dine with Me." You know, that meme that
Yeah,
goes back.
yeah, yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Hope you're happy with yourselves. You know, financially cheating, blah blah blah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, no, you gotta hand it to them. They're an incredible team. And hopefully someone stops them on the way to the treble. Maybe Man United. But it kind of just does feel like inevitable. If like
I mean,
this
you like any
carries
team, you
on.
would think like the run they've been on. You think like law of averages, they've got to have like one kind of slightly under par performance.
Mhm.
Like, and you always think that, but then I reckon Liverpool probably thought that when they like won 14 in a row or whatever it was when they needed to
Yeah.
chase them down for the league. Was sort of what was it a few years ago? And then last year, even then, like they had a couple of draws, but their level doesn't really dip. You know, it needs to dip quite significantly, I think, for other teams to have a chance, and then other teams have to also, be pretty clinical with the chances they get.
Hmm.
Man United might be able to do it. They've beaten once this season, but I think you're asking a lot. And it's similarly with Inter Milan. Like, they were good in that semi-final, but you're talking about a completely different kettle of fish here with Man City. The way they're playing at the moment,
Hmm.
I just unless Pep Galaxy brains it, I just don't know how they're going to lose either of those games. I can't see it.
Yeah. No, that's it. Um. Right on to the other end of the table. In that match, Nottingham Forest Arsenal. There was
Yeah,
also confirmed that Nottingham Forest are in the
safe.
Premier League
Yeah,
next season, which is
yeah.
amazing. All three promoted teams are safe.
Made us look stupid, haven't they?
So
With our
unbelievable. Like
predictions.
Bournemouth is like the one that everybody was getting wrong. I think I had Nottingham Forest to stay up.
I think George
Um,
had them down. I felt like we all the rest of us had them up, and I think we all had
I'm pretty sure at some point in the
Fulham.
season I've had them down, so I'm not gonna.
I have subsequently changed my mind. Sort of like I think probably from a couple of months ago, I said they were going to go down, basically because they couldn't defend. And sort of the ironic part
Mhm.
of that game on Saturday is like they could have played for another 90 minutes and not conceded the way it was
Yeah.
going. They were very well organised. I mean, you'd expect it in their last home game of the season. As you say, if they win, they secure survival. And you've got to say that their home form this season has been the bedrock for them staying up
Mhm.
because they don't do anything away from home.
No.
But they are tough to play against at home. It's obviously they create an atmosphere. They they're not brilliant defensively, but they are good enough, I think, to sort of make games competitive. They're obviously quite a big and physical team,
Yeah.
so there's sort of certain. there's certain like edges they can sort of create at home. They struggle away, which is well documented.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think if you're looking sort of ahead, I don't know how much you can rely on your home form completely, but I mean, fair play to them. Like, I think they've probably got one of the worst teams in the league, and they've deservedly beat us on Saturday. And it's not the first time they've beaten, a pretty good side. They beat Liverpool. I think they beat Spurs in the cup. They got a draw against Man City. Like, they've had some
Did they
good
beat
results at
Arsenal
home.
last season in the FA Cup?
They beat us in the FA Cup last
That
season.
was that the No More Red game?
Yeah.
That was.
I was saying, Fergal, I genuinely couldn't decide which I thought was a worse performance because that was bad, that one last season.
Yeah.
But we sort of were playing a bit of a mishmash team, whereas that on Saturday, it was sort of equally as bad. We didn't even have that excuse to fall back on, really.
I felt so bad about for Idris Elba. He's trying to put forward this really good about no, it was no more knife crime, wasn't it? That was the main message of it.
Yeah.
This really good message. No more red,
totally
wearing these like cool white
totally
t-shirts.
ruined it. Yeah.
Ruined it by not only losing, but losing to a team that plays in red. It was just it was shocking.
Quite ironic.
So congratulations to Nottingham Forest. Like it in some ways you're like, should a team like Nottingham Forest, in some ways they've done the right thing, and in other ways they've done the wrong thing. So the right thing, they stuck with their manager through thick and thin, and he's got them there in the end. The other side of it is that they've had to spend a ridiculous amount of money, had this ridiculous high turnover, but they've
it's
done
high
it.
risk. It is high risk.
So
Whatever way you look at it.
It's two almost contrasting methods that they've combined, and they've stayed up, which is just like amazing for them, and their fans like the fans seems like really really good on Saturday. I as you'd imagine, whenever you've just confirmed staying in the Premier League, but I'm sure that they'll that next season there'll be another attribute for the Premier League, like having a stadium like that still in it, as well as potentially Luton Town. But yeah, they stayed up, which means then, as we're recording this, by the way, we have Leicester versus Newcastle, which is why you might see me glance down at my phone cheekily. 0-0. So we'll know the result of that by the end of this podcast, I'd imagine. Even though obviously everybody listening knows already. So we'll talk about Leeds and Everton. Leeds against West Ham. A West Ham that's after. Well, we'll actually touch on West Ham briefly before. Amazing they've got into a European final. And all the chat and all that's amazing for them in the season that looked like it was going so bad to end on this high. And they can just focus on that. Really, really good. They probably should win the final. Is my thinking. They are going up against Fiorentina in Prague. I mean, that is a good final. Like Fiorentina,
that's a cracking final, isn't it? That's a nice one to go to. It's
I really don't.
And they sent Arsenal and Chelsea over there.
Good... I don't really know much about Fiorentina, but in fairness, I don't know anything about them. But they are one of these like cool, like Italian 90 teams with the purple jersey and everything.
You always think of them as sort of a traditionally big club. I like the only thing I know about them is Vlahovic used to play for them. That was because we were trying to sign him last season. Like it's you'd think West Ham would be favourites, but all I will say is I thought they would be favourites last year against Frankfurt, and we know how that turned out. So we'll see. Just on the Conference League in general, though, I just remembered I had a sort of a different point on it. Was that a lot of people are saying like, oh, isn't it so good that a team like this is there? A lot of people making the point, oh, this is what the Conference League is all about. This is
it's a team like West Ham, a minnow like West Ham having their day in the sun, a European final, which is all well and good from a Premier League perspective. However, to me, the Conference League was sort of meant to be sort of a non-top 5 league tournament in my head. Like, it was sort of aimed at like the smaller leagues having a chance at like winning some silver.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know how I feel about the Premier League teams being involved in this. However, if you take them out of it, or take any of the top 5 leagues out of it, then you're left with a competition that probably not many people watch. So maybe that's the catch-22 of it all. But just I didn't mean to take it away from West Ham at the end there, but yeah, it's just something to think about. But they enjoy their final, and yeah, Prague will be torn up. Your man Nolsey will probably be over, enjoying himself. Fair play at them.
Yeah.
But going back to the game against Leeds, another good win for West Ham. Leeds have got to be gutted about that. That was just. It was a must win. Would have been one of the targeted games. West Ham, after playing Thursday night,
And they
they
were 1 up as well.
1-0 up. And it was like a classic sort of I was going to say West Ham, but I mean Sam, Sam Allardyce goal, of a long throw in. It's sort of like what you expect from him, trying to get those set pieces going, but they just didn't have enough, and like the goals they conceded were poor.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible result for Leeds, and because whenever they went 1 up, I was thinking, God, I might actually be incorrect about Leeds here, and then they lost. But thankfully, for them, they're up against Spurs at home next weekend.
On their
So
hands though,
it's
because Everton got Bournemouth, and they could win against Spurs. Spurs have been pretty awful, but that might not be enough. If Everton beat Bournemouth, who sort of another team not really got anything to play for, which sometimes can make a team dangerous because
yeah
there's kind of no downside for them. But
yeah
if you're Everton and you said to them a few weeks ago, you need to beat Bournemouth on the last day and you're guaranteed survival, I think they would have taken it from the position they were looking like they were going to be in, sort of before they beat Brighton and they got a draw at the weekend. I think you sort of would sign for that.
Everton also might not need a win. A draw might do. Their goal difference is better than Leeds. That was the one thing I was thinking. For Leeds, not even to get a draw, which forces Everton to definitely have to get a win. Obviously, if Leeds were to win, but
Yeah.
now Everton could sneak by with a draw. There's three goal difference in it, which means so Leeds would have to win by 4 to leapfrog. And I don't know what the goal scored table is like, but
I mean, obviously, this is all sort of, and it's maybe not in the best interest of it, but if Leicester get a draw, they're above Leeds as well. They've got a better goal difference. So again, you sort of talk about being in their hands on the last day. If that result holds, and this is sort of quite unfortunate timing because this could look quite stupid in 5 minutes if Newcastle score them in 1-0, but you look at it, Leeds could win. There's 2 other teams that can also match their result. So that was bad, as you said. That was a game that would have been. I think when he came in, Man City very tough. Not expecting anything. I think Newcastle at home, a draw is a good result. Like
amazing
maybe
result. Like I didn't expect them to get anything
well,
from that.
to be honest, they played well, and maybe they'll be disappointed from being 1-0 up and getting a penalty. I think it's a bit frustrating. But then you go 2-1 down. 2-2 can't be a bad result. But you look at it now. That game on Sunday, they had to win, I think, because as you said, you got a West Ham team that it doesn't really matter for them. Like they've distanced themselves from relegation. It's a game that you'd look at and think, well, we'll turn up and see what happens. Been out on the Thursday night. Leeds have had a week to prepare it. Didn't do enough, and I think they're gone now.
I I think they will as well. Because I have a feeling Everton will get the result against Bournemouth, as I predicted.
Yeah,
Which means if Leicester don't get the result in the next few minutes, I
it's not in
think
their
Leicester
hands
City
either.
are down, which is crazy. Um,
It's when you think about literally this time 2 seasons ago, they were winning an FA Cup against Chelsea, and albeit they blew the top four, but they were at the time kind of heralded as the like kind of like
Harry,
Brighton are now.
is this? I can see you're trying to hide the glee in your face here. Is this the
I know what
is
you're
this the
thinking.
highlight of your season after a poor end?
I know what you're thinking because it all used to sort of be of Leicester replace Arsenal in
Yeah.
the Big Six, and like I'm not going to be that petty. I look at it and think if you were their fans at the time, you'd enjoy it. I think you sort of it's the media getting carried away. I don't particularly mind Leicester as a club. It was great when they beat Spurs to the league, albeit we were kind of vaguely in that
Mhm,
tight race as well. But it just goes to show that when you're operating, and I said this sort of with Brighton last week, like they look really good at the moment, and they look
mhm,
like they're doing everything right. But when you're talking about it is a race of arms,
mhm,
and when you start getting a few decisions wrong with the level of finances these teams have, and I know they're
mhm,
Premier League clubs, but ultimately they are mid-table at best, and actually you
mhm,
can't sort of compete. They didn't really have a right to be competing with the clubs that they were at the time. Now, I
mhm,
didn't think they'd slip this far, I must be honest with you, but it's a
mhm.
stark warning to kind of any Premier League club that if you rest on your laurels or you're complacent, you can quickly slide down the league. And
It shows how competitive the Premier League is. Like like take for example like Chelsea. Like the club has been a disaster. And we spent so much money,
you get what you
and yet
deserve.
and we've got exactly what we deserve. And we're like we've fallen so far down. And Leicester are a similar example. Um, and yeah, they just haven't made the right. They haven't continued to make like the great transfers that they were doing, and you almost need to do that, which is just impossible to like make these perfect transfers
Right,
whenever you've
every
got
time.
like maybe 50 million budget.
Yeah.
Um, if you sell players, that is as well. Really hard, and Leeds are sort of maybe a wee bit similar as well. Like they were doing the right thing on under Bielsa, in my opinion, and then they've gone from Bielsa to Sam Allardyce in a year. You know,
Yeah.
life comes at you fast, as the
Panic.
saying goes.
It's panic. It just goes to show, doesn't it? If things go, and we are talking about big stakes here. The financial side, the implications of relegation are absolutely huge, and that's sort of not even touching on the fact that they see themselves as a Premier League club. So the threat of relegation, I think, of course, it's gonna make you do funny things. I think, sort of as a club owner, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, as you say, they're kind of scrambling around at the end of the season, and they've had four managers in one season if you include the interim. That's
Mm-hmm.
not the recipe, I think, for sort of Premier League
No.
success. So
And, and then lastly, just to sort of round up this point, Southampton were another high flying team, as the point's been made. There was a wee
it is,
montage of like their
you know,
time in the Premier League. It's a great team, and yet they're the same. They they had this great model. They were the Brighton team before. Relying on great youth and then great transfers, and then it's just come unstuck ever since it seems like ever since they were taken over, it hasn't been as good. Um, but I still think, and this is with me with my Irish bias as well. I still think the players they have signed, I think, will be good for the championship. I kind of think that they will. They're likely to get back up again relatively soon.
Burnley.
Yeah, I think they could, and they it looks like they've got Russell Martin in from Swansea as their manager next year. Um, I don't think they would lose an awful lot of players. The only player maybe is Lavia, but then I remember they had Livramento, who was out the full season,
Yeah.
and has only recently come back. Like he looked brilliant at the start of the season. He should tear up the championship. So.
Mm.
Uh, they could be back, but it's a massive risk, or they may not be as well, because the championship next season is going to be so competitive. Right. Leicester City have finished 0-0 with Newcastle. So going into the last game of the season, Leeds 31 in 19th, Leicester in 18th, also in 31 with 11 better goal difference. 9 better goal difference, and then Everton 33 minus 24 goal difference. I think Everton will have enough to stay up. That's my prediction. You
I think
the
they've
same?
got the easiest game as well. I think when you look at it, I know West Ham are below Bournemouth in the table, but I would argue Everton have got the game that of the 3 fixtures, all at home, but I would say Everton have got the easiest one. I'd love to say that Leeds have got the easiest one because they're playing Spurs, but you don't want to be in. If you could pick any of their positions, you'd pick the team that are outside the relegation zone, unless they have a very hard game. And Bournemouth at home is not a very hard game. It's a game that if you need to win it to stay up, you should do that. And if you don't, then you got yourself to blame if you end up going down.
Yeah. Just briefly on Spurs, great result for Brentford. I wasn't expecting it. Like, whenever they won it up, I thought, Spurs are maybe finally clicking into gear here, doing well, but lose 3-1. Some great counter-attacking goals. And Buemo, who, if I remember rightly, was Rob Turner's favourite player. He was his pick out of the Brentford trio of Benrahma, Mbuemo and Tony.
It's not aged badly. I'd say he's probably maybe second to Tony, but
well, at least he'll be playing at the start of next season as well.
Yeah, they're gonna need him. They're gonna absolutely need him, no doubt.
Right then, we will fly over to the continent, as there are some really important things to talk about. We'll get straight into it with Vinicius Junior, who was racially abused playing against Valencia. And then he seemed to react as you would. The Valencia players then didn't like that he reacted towards their fans. He was then put in a headlock, and then sort of got himself out of it, slapped one of the player that done it. Was it Hugo Duro? I think it might have been the player that done it. I could be wrong about that. And then was sent off for it. And as has been said in, like, ever since this broke out, like the commentators at the time weren't great on it. I don't have their exact quotes, but if it's been around on Twitter, if you want to go listen.
Like almost implying that he brings some of it on himself with the way he kind of behaves and provokes, which, well, I mean, it's just
it's the sort of thing you'd say if we were talking about like not getting a free kick. You know what I mean? It's like, he dives a bit too much, so he's not helping himself there. No. Yeah. We're talking about racism here, like
human side to all of this.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's just terrible that these things still are happening, and Vinicius Junior has come out and has had some rightfully harsh words about Spain in general and La Liga in general.
In truth, it's nothing new for him personally.
No,
he's experienced it on numerous occasions. I think there was a game early this season where he was getting death threats, I think, from the Atletico Madrid fans, as well as sort of vile racist abuse. So it's nothing new for him, and you can see why, sort of as just on a human level, he's kind of reached the end of his tether with it. I think you look at his reaction and it's a completely human one. And that's sort of like the sad part about it when you're sort of looking at it thinking, well, justice hasn't been done there. Not least because at least one of the other players from Valencia should have also been sent off. And you just like, how on earth? He was the only one that went there. I do not know.
on a minor note, like I don't know what their VAR was doing. Like I don't know, like how
Yeah,
they didn't notice that.
yeah,
To for the other guy to be sent off, like, and that was like to put somebody in a headlock. Like I feel like that's one of the more severe things you could do in a football pitch. That should be like a pretty significant ban to be doing that, in my opinion. Rather than like just like the usual slaps or whatever that are done. But yeah, as has been said, like things need to change, and also the players need to be protected more, and they need to be empowered to and feel right to be able to walk off the pitch completely if those things happen, because that's when things change. But yeah, but really sad to see. Yeah,
yeah.
but we'll move on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I don't know how you could impossibly in any way come down on sort of any other side of this argument. Like it's just so black and white for me. And
Mhm.
all I would say is sort of, on the commentators or anyone else sort of think along those lines. I can't quite understand the thinking behind kind of falling over yourself to defend what is absolute undoubted racism. It just
Yeah.
doesn't right with me. It's not something I understand whatsoever. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think pretty clear for us and kind of any football fan, any human being. It's just not right on a human level. So
Mhm.
sad to see, and as you said, change is needed.
Um, yeah. And I've just remembered as well. Speaking about change, Tebas has also come out and said just missing the point again. Um, I can't think of the exact quotes that were said because I think it was a Spanish tweet as well. But I, as has been reported, it wasn't a good look for Tebas either, who just doesn't seem to be getting the point of it. Um,
No.
on to maybe well, it's definitely a lighter issue. It's Juventus, and their 10 point deduction has now been they've now brought it back. Or it was more points initially.
It was
Was
more. I think it was more initially. It might have been 15 initially. It was
Yeah.
certainly more than 10. Now it is 10, and that effectively, with their result tonight, season end to their Champions League charge, losing 4-1 to Empoli. Now they're down in seventh with 2 games left. So yeah, I mean, real ramifications there. It's been a bad week for them, losing the Europa League to Sevilla in the semi-finals, and then
I
obviously
think they
this
would
is
have been
kind of really,
expecting themselves
and
to
they won
get through in
as
that tie.
well. Which yeah, I thought they would. It was especially when they went 1-0 up. I thought, okay, Sevilla are very good and they got that know-how,
Hmm.
but Juventus are sort of, they're one of the most prestigious clubs in world football, and you think they're going to get over the line here. And I bet they wish they had now, because it looks like, well, seemingly, unless the other teams above them blow up, they won't be playing in the Champions League next year. It does Arsenal a favour because it gets us into pot 2, because we would then effectively replace them. So I'm pretty thrilled about it, as you can probably imagine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, all I would say, and I'm not sort of, again, I mean to sort of bang on about Man City, but it just goes to show, like, you need to reach a decision, I think, about these things, like, quite quickly, because it's just been farcical when you look at it. They've had a points deduction, then they've appealed it, so the points deduction gets taken away. Now it's been put back on, but it's sort of slightly less. It's a really messy and quite bad look for the game of football, in truth, where you've got sort of, misconduct that's gone on, and you're slow to sort of come to a decision. They're able to then appeal it and kind of delay what is essentially the inevitable.
The
It's
appeals
not a
are
good look.
always the most annoying bit, because it's almost just like, instead of like it being like a justice, it's more of just like a negotiation. It's
Yeah,
it
I
like
think as a club, you probably have to be seen as sort of like, strongly refuting said allegations, because
yeah.
otherwise it's this sort of acceptance of guilt, and they're probably going to come down harder on you. So when do clubs ever not appeal these things?
Yeah.
I can't think of a single example where it hasn't happened. So no, it's just a complete mess. and they've got what's coming to them. The whole operation seemingly, by the looks of it, was completely crooked. I mean, everyone involved has pretty much been banned from working in football, sort of seemingly.
A lot
For
of them
life.
resigned very soon after the
It's sort of jump
allegations came
before
out.
the push sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good look for them. And well, thank you very much. We'll sort of take your place, lads, on your trot.
As will Milan or potentially Atalanta. Milan have jumped up into fourth then as a
Into
result.
fourth.
Yeah, 64 points. They're on. Atalanta in fifth on 61.
Milan actually have Juventus on Sunday, so that was sort of an interesting side plot to all of this. If they had been able to win tonight, it was still technically in their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But with that 4-1 loss tonight, I mean, you wonder how much they probably knew before they went out to play, because it's kind of, just before kickoff it was announced.
Yeah,
but you'd assume
perhaps.
behind the scenes they would have known. I think probably from last night there was sort of like whispers of it. How something like that affects your preparations is you've seen the opposite with Man City, kind of as I said earlier, where it's actually, I think, in some way given them the spark they needed, and kind of you're able to kind of foster this us against the world kind of mentality. But with Juventus, it's been a bad week for them, and yeah, a shocking result tonight. And well, I was going to say shocking turn of events, but I suppose it isn't really, because as I said, it was sort of, if they weren't going to get these punishments this season, they were definitely going to come at some point.
Yeah.
So, good on them for actually sort of forcing them to accept it now, but not a good look overall.
The top four race in Italy, Roma are just about still in it, but they drew to Santorina, that team. They drew with them tonight 2-2. Which if they had got the win would have put them ahead of Atalanta and would have been only 2 points behind Milan. So still to play for, but Milan can clinch it. If they win their next game, they'll virtually have it. Yeah, I think all that's left, Harry, is our short king of the week.
King of the week. I think there's only one nominee for me, and you've already mentioned him. I think it's got to be Brian Mbeumo. 5'7", and he scored 2 goals, and they're against Spurs. As an Arsenal and a Chelsea fan, I mean, how do you top that?
My short king of the week, slightly different.
He's come prepared.
Vinicius Junior. He's 5'9". I think it's a bit of an easy one. Do you want to debate that one, Harry? Maybe not.
I thought he was taller.
I've literally just checked. 5'9" he is. Yeah, I think it feels right.
Fair enough. I thought I had a good one there. You've trumped me. Fair play, Fergal. Well done. We can shake hands and agree on this one.
Yeah.
No argument from me.
But yeah, definitely a nod to Mbeumo. He's especially because he is quite short. Like there's no way.
I was pretty pleased with that one. We kind of usually scrape the barrel with 5'9".
Yeah.
I think we're on 5'10". It's sort of 5'7" is. I mean, that's pretty sort of our height, really. Sort of it's just then you really get into the sort of realms of shortness. But yeah, Vinicius Junior, no argument from me.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, that's this week for Just Another Football Podcast. We've got one more game week to go in the Premier League, and then the Champions League after. So there's probably a couple more episodes in us. We'll probably be doing our reflections on our predictions soon and team of the season, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said we've spoken about our predictions quite a bit, so I think we're going to have to sit down and. I think we did it last year, didn't we? We sort of worked out who'd done the worst, because I'd ended up being the closest. So I've got a reputation to uphold here.
I think I'm going to be fourth again. I don't think I'd be surprised if anybody's had a really good prediction.
I think we all had Man City as winners. Maybe Ali might have gone Liverpool. I can't remember. I think sort of other than that, like I had Arsenal fourth, and I thought even that I was being a little bit optimistic. And I think, yeah, like no one would have had Newcastle where they are. Man United had 6. Like, we'll get into it. We don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it's that'll be one I think people you want to
Get
tune
ready for a
into.
good laugh, folks. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks very much. Take care and goodbye. Good stuff.